Music on.
Alrighty, well, welcome to the Gateway Open Office Hours episode 22. I'm Carter Laren, and my magical host who's behind the camera is Ben Larson.
I got kicked off set today.
Yes, you got kicked off set for just being a horrible person. Every week here on Gateway Open Office Hours, we talk about questions that we think that founders send in to us. You can tweet at us. You can use the hashtag GatewayOH to tweet questions to us. You can send us messages on Facebook. And we just talk about issues that concern founders, specifically founders in the cannabis world. What else? I guess you can follow us on Twitter at Gateway Inc. And there's probably some kind of follow button right above the video on Facebook where you'll get notifications when we go live. Again, every Friday at 10 a.m. So today, the real reason Ben's not on camera is because we don't have room in our studio for Ben anymore. We're going to talk about hardware. We've got a couple Gateway founders here who just got back on a trip from China. We sent them to China for 3 weeks. I guess we talked about hardware a couple weeks ago with Madeline Duval, one of our mentors, but we're really here to get more of a founder perspective on hardware and manufacturing in China. Before we do, I feel like usually we try and do news. Ben, we didn't talk about any news really that needs to be covered this week. I don't think there was a lot that happened, but I do think there's a public service announcement that I want to make, which is it's the last day. Actually, maybe banks are open tomorrow, but sometimes there's financial things that need to happen by the end of the year, and if they don't happen, they can be very, very horrible for you because you can't do them on January 1st. And December 31st and January 1st have very big differences for example, the IRS. So if there's stuff that you need to get done by the end of the year, do it today. Get it done.
For instance, I know that we wrote a check to SSDP yesterday. So if you would like a tax deduction, now's a good day to do it.
That's a great example, God. Yeah. If you want to donate to SSDP, do it today, God damn you. All right. That covers the public service announcements. Let's talk to Jason Levin and Joshua, not Josh. Joshua Mezer. Jason's from Uptoke. Joshua is from Hydro Garden. I don't know what you're calling yourself right now. You guys are both hardware founders, like I said. We just sent you to China for 3 weeks. You're part of the current cohort, and you just came back. Why don't you start by just introducing yourselves a little bit and telling us about your company and what your products are?
Sure. I'm Jason Levin, and we make an electronic cigar vaporizer. We basically wanted to take the same kind of intuitiveness and immediacy of an e-cigarette, but make it available for solid flowers without any kind of prep work.
That's it? That's your pitch? Okay.
I wasn't sure how many...
No, that's fine. That's fine.
I can go into more detail.
Joshua, I forgot his middle name. I was going to call him his middle name to embarrass. Jacob. Yeah. Joshua Jacob.
Okay.
What would you tell us about?
So I develop a pair of electric smart scissors. Essentially, we had a concept that we wanted to put the finesse and the delicacy and control that one has with a pair of manual scissors and transfer that over into a power tool. So it's still giving you like the natural sensation that you're using a pair of scissors, but with a touchpad and a button, as opposed to continuously opening and closing your hands.
Alrighty. So for each of you, why did you go to China? Like, what stage are you in your company so that people just kind of know? And then what made you decide that you needed to spend 3 weeks of precious founder time fumbling around China?
Well, we're both in prototype stage, where we have prototype samples. And for me, at least, I spent 3 weeks running around China because I wanted to meet with a lot of factories and manufacturers. I wanted to see things from that end of things and build those relationships and kind of forge a path forward from EVT stage through production.
Yeah, I think if you're a hardware founder, the reality is that pretty much all hardware gets built in China. So I think you're probably going to find yourself fumbling around the Bay Area more so, as opposed to when you're in China. That's really where the sort of rubber hits the road. And for me personally, just going out there, and I think 3 weeks is the right amount of time. Like if you go out there for 1 week, you're just kind of like, whoa, what just happened? And then you're gone. By the end of 2 weeks, you've really started to get a better understanding how China works. You've had a few relationships, a couple of sort of the meetings, and your performance is starting to accelerate. And then by the end of the third week, you've come back with a handful of options, and you're ready to go home. So I would advise.
And it's Christmas or whatever. When did you guys get back? You guys?
Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so for both of you, I mean, I don't know if these answers are going to be the same for both of you, so feel free to jump in and interject with differences. But you both went over with prototypes. Did you feel like there was more work to be done? Did you feel ready to manufacture when you went over there, or did you feel like you had more work to do just to get to manufacturing?
Well, I think that a lot of products that are designed in the Bay Area, no matter how good your development firm is, once you go over to China, the reality is that you're going to realize your product isn't ready for production. And I think that for me was a big mentality difference, was that when you're talking to Chinese engineers, the first thing they're considering is not can we build this, it's can we manufacture this. So for me, that was a big mentality difference.
Describe that nuance, like can we build this versus can we manufacture this?
Okay, so an example that's relative to myself is we're developing a quick interchangeable blade system for the product that we're developing. And I've sort of struggled with how to do this. There's lots of different ways. So, sort of at this point, I've got a pretty concrete concept of how I want that done. And I sit down with, a group of Chinese engineers from Shenzhen Valley Ventures. And the first thing they start to do is they're like, okay, well, how can we make this? Not can we make this, because that's a given, right? But can I have this as a sub-assembly that can then go into mass production?
Okay, so it's how do we mass produce this in an economical way?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is different than how do I
because you
make
can just
this one
CNC
thing.
anything, right? Like,
Right.
That's pretty basic, but you can't really CNC everything through mass production.
Right.
So immediately they're sort of like dividing it up and having, okay, we're going to have this side, we're going to weld on here, and then the two blades will sit on there. And they're looking at it right from the get-go from that perspective. As from my experience, at least working with US engineers, they're more focused on what is the best user interface for this when they're developing something. They're not necessarily how can we get this into mass production.
And did you find that there was a big difference between what you felt like, oh, this is working and works well, and then got over to China and realized, oh, actually, there's more to be done on getting it manufactured than I thought. Like, was there a big?
I don't think
It was DFM a big deal, I guess, is my question.
I don't think we had any illusion.
Yeah,
Okay,
we didn't
you
have
expected it to be bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We expected there to be, I mean, in Joshua's case, there were sort of design changes that needed to happen for the interchangeable blade system, and then some design decisions to be made. And in my case, like there were some fairly big problems to solve, and it was a question of solving those design issues with manufacturing in mind, rather than coming up with a
Right.
solution that you were never going to be able to mass produce.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And so, what did you you went to a lot of different factories. Everyone kind of throws China, like manufacturing in China is like a blob for a lot of people outside of China. It's like one thing. But you went to Shanghai, you went to Shenzhen, you went to Hong Kong. Were there different types of factories, and can you talk a little bit about what you were looking for? Because you didn't go to just one factory.
No, we went to dozens, and there's a huge amount of differentiation. And I think part of that process is not just plug and play, let me just find a room full of people that can put something together, but finding factories that have the product-specific or technology-specific experience for what you're trying to build. Like, for instance, for me, we're looking for people that sort of have that consumer electronics experience, but also understand heating elements and also understand high power and small space applications. And we spent a lot of time dealing with companies and how advanced their motor control capabilities are for Josh's product.
Okay.
And so like companies that build products with motors in them don't necessarily build them with the kind of fine motor control that, say, a robotics company might have.
I see.
And so being able to kind of drill down into that very specific differentiation, you can't really do that over the phone. You want to be able to go see what their engineers are working on, talk to their engineers, use a translator if you have to. What have you worked on before? What do you currently build, and what's the nature of those products?
So how open were they to that kind of an investigation? Like, were you able to kind of go into a factory and say,
Oh, yeah.
figure out how much they understood fine motor control and
Yeah, I mean, you just ask them of, products they've done in the past that are similar to that, what their experience are with brushless motors. The one thing that you have to realize is everybody out there is hungry for business, right? So no matter what factory that you walk into, they're not going to sit there and be like, no, we can't do that.
they'll all say yes.
Well, they'll all say yes, but with good reason. Because realistically, it's all within their capabilities, okay? But do I want to go work with a factory that's got to go hire engineers or find that talent outside of house? Or do I want to go work with a factory that has all that skills and experience within house already?
Right.
Nobody wants to turn away business, and I think that's something that is a little overwhelming for entrepreneurs when they first get out there because they're like, oh, I have, everybody can do this. Like, who do I pick?
Right.
And it's really up to you to sort of dive down and, ask the right questions and find the right examples and talk to their engineers and kind of get an understanding from them. Okay, so you can do this, but are you, does the shoe fit?
Right. So this gets into a question I was about to ask, and maybe you've just answered it, although maybe there's more to this answer. How do you vet factories? I mean, like, do you just
Show up.
you just show up and look at what they're doing and talk to them? Like, is it a relationship thing? Like, what do you do?
You ask a lot of questions. You look for referrals. You look at their experience and their track record of what they've built. You have a frank conversation with them.
Look how busy they are, ask how many employees they've had, how many they're at today. I mean, just visually, you can get quite a lot of cues from the factory. I mean, it's not hard to look at the difference between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. You just walk in there and you're like, okay, you've got 80 employees.
The floor is dirt.
Yeah, the floor is dirty.
Right.
Yeah, you're probably and again that factory produces products, right?
Right.
But maybe your product isn't a cable. That simply needs to be welded and on and attached to it. Maybe your product's got a little bit more complexity, so you want to work with a factory that's got the experience of how to run a complicated production line. Some production lines are really simple. Other production lines, each laborer is sitting there doing 10 parts out of a 100-part procedure, as opposed to just having 10 parts in general.
Right. Right.
I don't know, how else did we vet factories?
I think our questioning got better after the first couple meetings.
Definitely.
I think you sort of learned through experience what questions to ask.
Yeah, like how much are you producing right now? Like, do you have more bandwidth in your facility? Right. How quickly can you hire employees? Because you'll meet people out there and they're like, okay, yeah, well, if we need more people, we can just hire more people. And at first you kind of have the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, it sounds a little skeptical. But in reality, that's what all these factories do, whether they're a 4,000 person factory or whether they're a 50
They have
factory.
a pool that they draw from a talent.
Yeah, they have a pool, and it's relatively low skilled labor for the most part. So besides the engineering staff that you're qualifying separately, the labor that's actually going onto the line, I mean, it is a country of 1.4 billion people, and they are all hungry to work.
Right.
So I think having that ability to realize that, okay, this is a small factory or it's a large factory, but either way, where are your resources at right now and what is your bandwidth capability?
Were they relatively open with answering your questions and giving you information you asked for?
For the most part, I'd say they were.
I mean, if anything, the ones that weren't, right, were the ones that I took at a higher standard. So the ones that were like, no, we're not going to let you go into that room right now because confidential, production is going on in there. As opposed to the ones that are like, yeah, come look at this new product we're developing.
Why don't you copy this?
And that was something that we actually kept an eye out for, was to see exactly what they'll let us do. And then we know when our product is getting built in that place, exactly what's going to be going on for our product.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Do they want you to, or are they okay with you taking pictures? Are they not okay? Do they have things clearly marked where you're allowed to go and where you're not allowed to go? Is anybody enforcing that?
Right. Did you come away feeling, like that was a risk for you guys, or did you come away feeling like, yeah, this is good?
I mean, that's the most blasé question, right? You get an American that goes over there,
fair.
and I'm so sick and tired of hearing anybody, whether American or English, whatever, being like, oh, how am I going to stop my idea from getting stolen? It's just like, I mean...
Well, you know how we feel about that generally. It's like your idea is basically worthless.
Exactly. But, and
worry about executing.
Yeah, and then once you've executed, right, how am I going to protect all my design files? The reality is once you're on the market, you can't protect anything anyway because it's all reverse engineerable.
Right.
So I would say act quickly and execute quickly.
Well, the question really is let me give you a little bit more nuanced question. The question really is, did you come away feeling the risk in China or anywhere, right, is that the factory, at 5 o'clock says they stop producing, and keeps things running for the overnight, and then sells them on a different label. The factory stealing your stuff. This happens all the time, right? It happens. I know in media, for example, because it's super easy. You just keep stamping DVDs and sell them in China, and don't tell Fox about them or whatever.
Yeah.
But you didn't come away feeling like that was an issue with any of them. You're not,
Personally, no.
I think it depends on the relationships that you
Yeah,
create.
really, that's what it's down to. And you have to realize, you're going out there, and I think a lot of people go out there with the mentality of, oh, these people work for me now. This is my factory, they're building this for me. And the reality is that's a partner, and that's somebody that you want to have a successful relationship on both ends of the spectrum. So, a great piece of advice we had is never go to China expecting to make money. Go to China expecting to make other people money, and then you'll make money in return. And I thought that was a really great way to look at it.
Who gave you that advice? That's good advice.
That was Bob?
No, I was. Maybe it was.
Yeah. We had a lot.
A guy named Bob.
We've had a lot of advice.
Awesome. Well, that narrows it down. Thank you, boys.
What was his company? That was Bob from what's his company?
I thought it was Angel.
Garen Angel? Oh, it might have been Garen
All right,
Angel.
we don't have to keep figuring out. It wasn't that great advice. It was good. All right, so that's good. So, I think the reason I'm asking these questions is there is a lot of trepidation a lot of times from Americans, like, oh, do I really want to go to China? And
For example, we would hear stories of people that go to China, right?
Yeah.
And then they just go to Hong Kong, and they're too scared to leave Hong Kong and go to mainland China and actually check factories
They
out.
can get the suppliers to come to them.
Yeah, that's
in
not
Hong
how
Kong.
you build a good relationship,
right.
right?
so that's my question. Do you feel like, and it sounds like the answer is pretty obvious here, but do you feel like this is something that could be accomplished any other way?
No.
Or do you have to go and meet with the people and shake their hands and look them in the eye and see what's going on?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
That's like saying, could you get married to somebody, over Skype?
That's
You have to.
Well,
Great
arranged
analogy.
marriages do work.
Maybe sometimes. So wait, maybe you're that 1 in a million with the company you
Yes.
find over the internet.
You could, but internet divorces also work. Yes. All right.
Yeah, I'd say if you're in hardware, you absolutely have to go there because the reality is there's not a whole lot gets built in the United States. And if you want to have a meaningful relationship with a partner business over there, I'd get out there as soon as you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you guys did Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. Was there a reason? Are there different? I know the answer to this a little bit, but I'd like the viewers to know. Are there different areas in China where you find different kind of factories?
Yeah, for sure.
Tell us a little bit about what you guys.
We found that a lot of head offices that do most of the dealings with the U.S. might be located in Hong Kong. Although we didn't do that many meetings in Hong Kong.
That's because if you go through Hong Kong before you go to mainland China, it's a higher price.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you just go straight to mainland China, go straight to the factory, you're going to get a
Interesting.
different price set.
Interesting.
The price structure there is a whole nother topic. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And is Shenzhen full of people who know motors, but also people who do plastics, and also
It's
people
mostly
who do
consumer electronics.
Yeah.
Okay.
We actually went to Shanghai. It was an hour or two outside of Shanghai because it was the biggest power tool factory, I think, in the world. And so
So power tools are outside of Shanghai, different spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the south is more consumer electronics.
Yeah.
The north is more heavy industries, chemical type stuff, medical products.
You can see the evolution, right, of how China has progressed through their manufacturing. And it starts in Beijing, where you have a lot of the raw materials, extracts. You're fabricating the PCB board itself, and then by the time you get down to Shenzhen, it's SMT assembly. And you can kind of see the graph almost. as
So
it goes,
basically, what
through
you're saying is
Shanghai and-
starting in the high north, they're extracting raw material,
Yeah,
and by the time they get to Hong Kong, they have iPhones, and it's beautiful.
Pretty much, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, excellent. I've never heard China explained that way before.
A big country conveyor belt.
Shenzhen is a remarkable city. I mean,
It really is.
It's you've never seen so many high rises built so quickly, and it's a 30-year-old city, and it really kind of summarizes how much of a melting pot China is. I think a lot of people think of China as a big blob, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's multiple different languages. There's over 100 different languages that are spoken in China. And someone who speaks Mandarin has no ability to communicate with someone who's speaking, a language from a village up north who they've never met before.
Right.
And Shenzhen is really like a melting pot in a modern city. I mean, it kind of makes the Bay Area look a little slow.
What was the fact that we heard? There's probably 40 or 50 skyscrapers that are going up at any given time on
Yeah.
the skyline.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, about how long does it take you to build a skyscraper? Well, about 5 or 6 months.
Wow.
Can you imagine a skyscraper going up
pretty
in
awesome.
San Francisco in 5 or 6 months?
Yeah.
I could if it started to sink a little bit. I don't know. Yeah, no, I remember at one point, and this was like 10 years ago even, hearing that something ridiculous like 70% of the world's cranes for heavy construction were like in like 2 or 3 cities in China.
Oh, I believe that.
I believe that.
Yeah.
it's
And they're all made there. So.
Yeah, that's why they're there, maybe.
But in the north, because it's a heavy industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, do you guys have any more? Do you guys have any more advice for hardware founders who are kind of just starting out? What would your advice be for like when do you make the trip to China? What do you have to
As
do
soon as possible.
before? Really, you have an idea?
Yeah.
You just get on a plane and go.
Honestly,
to China?
that's what I would do. I mean,
Okay.
the reality
I think
of
it depends on the approach.
Yeah, and it depends on the entrepreneur too. I mean,
Yeah.
for me personally, if I could go back in time, I would spend my resources in China, mainly because they go a lot.
So even
further.
pre-prototype, you would have been there. Just
I would have prototyped everything in China. 'Cause
Interesting.
Right from the beginning, you're working with a team that's developing a prototype that's developed for mass production. So the number of hurdles that you're going to have to jump in that race is, right from the beginning has been cut in half.
excellent.
So I would say that if you're an entrepreneur, you're typically an adventurous person, right? You've got an idea and you've got some money in the bank. I would go to China, hire engineers, and try to work with a factory as early as possible. Because otherwise you're going to be in the States working with expensive engineers who don't necessarily know how to get something into mass production.
And you'll be wasting those resources and time.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially wasting resources. Now, if you're working on a product that's very conceptual and not very well
That's the point I was going to make.
Yeah, you want to hit that point?
I can hit that point.
All right.
Go ahead, disagree with.
No,
it's not a
agreeing. He's just
disagreement.
going to build
It's-
on the point.
Yeah, it's a bit of a caveat. Is that if you have a very straightforward product, like for your product, it's a pair of scissors with a touchpad, with a bevel gear. It's in terms of conceptually how it's going to operate, very straightforward. You can say, I want you to build it like this. I want it designed like that, and here's like very concrete what the PCB is going to do.
Right.
I think that you can go over there and hire engineers and get the job done faster and a lot cheaper.
So would you recommend doing that like even before you had like SolidWorks files, like literally?
Well, they're not going to be able to use the SolidWorks files out there for one.
Yeah, they're going to convert it to Pro E.
Okay.
There's another hurdle you just missed in the race.
Great. So okay.
But if your product is more high level, if you don't have a very concrete idea of exactly how each piece is going to operate, or let's say you want something to turn on a certain way, but you don't know not even what model, but what type of sensor you want to use for that, or you need it to achieve certain metrics, but you don't have a very good, clear idea of exactly how that's going to be done, you might be better off starting over here and then moving over there early, but not necessarily at the very beginning. I find that U.S. engineers are much more expensive, but they're really great at creative problem solving.
So once you have something that you feel like can be sketched out and you understand the components, but before you have a prototype, that's when you
So
go.
much cheaper to build a prototype.
Personally,
over there.
I'd go over there, yeah. I mean, it's so much cheaper. It's designed for production, and yeah, it's the reality of things are, when I came back from China, one of the things that surprised me is, a lot of my friends like to jive me, like, oh, you went to China to go build something, I'm like, yeah, I did. Where did
Wait,
all your
what's the
Christmas
joke
presents
there?
come
Like,
from?
what's the- you went to China to build- Yeah.
Like everything is,
Yeah. Okay.
everything's made there ultimately.
Also, the speed that you can turn stuff around. If I want to get something CNC'd, if let's say I have a mechanical engineer in the U.S. design a piece for me, and I say I want to test this, so I need to get it machined, but maybe I need 3 or 4 versions of it with different tolerances, so that I can quickly, maybe if I want to pay a huge premium, I can get it done in less than a week and then
Yep.
shipped out to me. When I'm over there, I can get it turned around in 24 hours or less. Maybe,
Nice.
I can walk
They
downstairs
go to the
to
afternoon.
machine.
That afternoon, they go do it. Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I want you to design this in the morning. I want you to cut it in the afternoon, and by 5 o'clock, they're
We'll
working.
go out to dinner and look at the person.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've now
We'll
accomplished
spin
in
it on
one
the lazy
day.
Susan.
Yeah, exactly. One work day, I've done what would otherwise take 2 weeks here.
Time is hugely valuable for entrepreneurs. So.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we feel good about having sent you to China because it sounds like it was a good move. Do you guys agree it was a good move?
That was a great
We should have
move.
done
I
it.
should have done it years ago.
Yeah. We should have sent you years ago. How'd you apply
What were you
years ago? Yeah. Good, but I don't want to have just a China love fest here. What are the downsides of? There's got to be downsides of going to China and not maybe manufacturing in China. Maybe not
I got
downsides of
food
going.
poisoning.
Okay. From a business perspective, are there reasons to avoid it? Are there other places you would look other than China? There's Taiwan, there's Mexico, like there's
Again,
other,
like, so if you go to Taiwan, right, the reality is that half your parts are going to be coming from mainland China anyway. So you're then going to go to Taiwan, and you're going to have to move parts over to Taiwan, out of Taiwan. I think as
like
the
Taiwan
global,
and Japan for batteries and power.
Yeah, I think as like the global economy changes in 4 or 5 years' time, I think it'll start to make more sense with automation and stuff to really look at getting stuff produced outside of China. But I would say right now that's where the bulk of the world's products are made.
And it's
even
because
if
of the
it's
cheap
just
labor.
components.
Is that
I don't know if it's because of the cheap labor. I think it's really the way that the Chinese government has structured their economy. I think if you were to go back in time and look at like the trade agreements that America's made, moving all this labor out, that was in a way the detriment to America. But then China was sitting there like, okay, we'll pick up this
We'll do
slack.
it. Right,
We'll
yeah.
do this.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's not just low-level manufacturing, but there's engineering work there that you can rely on Chinese engineers to do a good job helping you DFM.
Yeah, I think communication is obviously that's one of the hardest things. Is having a fluent conversation with somebody is even no matter how good their English is.
It's hard with you, man.
It's hard. It is true. And that's the funny thing. I'd be like, yeah, well, communicating with Americans isn't that easy either.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's a problem, but there are certain ways to overcome that, like getting an engineer to repeat how they understood a task back to you. And there are little like key techniques that you can learn along the way to help the communication, like writing everything down after a meeting that you've covered. Because for the most part, the Chinese read really pretty well on average, and they're
English.
They're English, yeah.
Okay.
Their English comprehension written is really good. Now, their verbal, not so much so, because they haven't necessarily had an English teacher there explaining how to pronounce this word.
Right. And anyone who's taken a foreign language, usually it's, at least from my experience, has been the same, right?
Yeah.
The foreigner always speaks much more quickly than I can comprehend, but if it's written down, I can kind of...
Yeah, and if you don't know something, you can look it up.
Yeah.
But it's also easy to practice reading English. All you need to do is log online.
Right.
But to practice speaking English, you need somebody else to practice with.
Right. Okay, so that's good advice. So you write down everything to make sure that they've, like, this is how, to summarize, this is what we talked about.
Yeah.
And you ask them to, like, reflect back to you what they think they're
Verbally
doing.
reflect it back, and when they say yes, a lot of times we hear like this cliche thing, they just say yes, 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 yes.
Right.
And well, that's because they're really just saying, okay, move on, or kind of explain more.
Right.
It's not necessarily that they're being like, yes, we can make this, right? That's how you're interpreting it. But what they're communicating is, okay, explain more, continue. So I wouldn't say that yes really means yes. It's not an equal translation.
Yeah.
But having them repeat back their understanding of
yeah.
what you want them to do, it just makes it abundantly clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or how the product works. Or
So, okay. Any other kind of hurdles that you need to overcome, or...
beds.
Yeah, the beds. The beds.
This has turned into a travel show.
A little bit.
The bed.
Well, you got to be on your game, right? You need to have a good night's sleep.
That is
So
true.
pay for the more expensive hotel. Is that your...
Test the
be
bed
that
in the
expensive.
more expensive hotel before you get the hotel.
Yeah.
that
So
would be my
the
qualifier.
expense doesn't correlate one-to-one with
Not
beds?
necessarily.
The Chinese like really firm beds, and we both like firm beds, but this is to another level. Sometimes.
I see. But Diane is in the back laughing. Do you like firm beds? I shouldn't know. I'll ask later. All right. Well, look, thank you guys. I think we're trying to keep these shows short. I don't know that we accomplished it this week, but thank you guys for coming. Anyone who wants to follow Jason, it's at Uptoke on
It
Twitter.
is.
Josh, it's at High Technology, HII Technology, all one word. He might change that Twitter handle in the next couple months. Who knows? Things could happen. Next week, we're going to get back to talking about collateral that you need to go out for investing, so pitching material and other stuff. So join us next week for that. We'll broadcast again here live from Gateway Works, and we do it every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you, Gateway Works. Again, if you for people interested, I'm going to have to read this. I'm sorry, but anyone interested? Let's see. Oh yes, it's Gateway OH. If you go to gatewayworks.com, if you're interested in joining the only cannabis co-working space that we know of, at least. If you want to receive $150 off the first month, go to Gateway OH or go to gatewayworks.com and use the code GatewayOH to get that $150 off. And that's the end of my pitch for Gateway Works. Thank you guys again for coming. Thank everyone for watching.
Thanks for having
And
us.
thanks
for watching.
Thanks, Ben,
Yeah.
in the background. Do you want to say anything at the end? Awesome.